Welcome to the SquaMates podcast. This is a very serious podcast about reptiles and amphibians, and I am one of your four hosts. My name is Dr. Mark D. Schertz. I am the curator of herpetology at the Natural History Museum of Denmark, and I'm joined today by my three lovely co-hosts, Ethan Kosak.
Hi, I'm Ethan. I draw stuff and I keep animals, and that's it.
Hero Nike.
Hi, I'm Hyrule, a snake ecologist and conservationist from South Africa.
And Gabriel Ughetto.
And I'm Gabriel Ughetto, and I'm a paleo artist, scientific illustrator, and concept artist, and I used to work in herpetology, but not anymore.
You guys, the vibes are good because we are in a particularly silly mood at the moment. I think it's maybe a coping mechanism with the world status in general. But anyway, all is fine. On the 7th or 8th take, we've gotten to the end here, and we can finally get to talking about everything that's going on in the world. No, not what's going on in the world of herpetology, that which actually matters. So we can give just maybe a quick update from ourselves. There's something very, very monumentous and exciting for me that's about to happen on Friday this week. Today is Wednesday, the 12th of March. And in 2 days, I will have my final tenure appraisal seminar. So as of next week, I will be an associate professor at University of Copenhagen. That is very nice for me because mostly it allows me to apply for funding that I couldn't apply for before. And I'm then allowed to be the sole supervisor on PhDs, which I have not been until now because things are very weird at my university. So that's very exciting. I get to give a 45-minute presentation followed by like an hour and 15 minutes of questioning by various people. We've got I have external opponents who come because this is basically like a PhD defense at grander scale. So I've got Katharina Wollenberg, who's actually my academic sister, is coming. And so academic sister in the sense that we did, both of us did our PhDs with Miguel Vences. So he is our doctoral father, as it were, in the German way that we refer to these things. Doktorvater, drink. And then it's also Anthony Herre, who is the, I believe, director of science at the museum in the Natural History Museum in Paris. So both of them are going to come and apparently have 20 minutes each to ask me difficult questions about my research, which is going to be so much fun. Followed by a whole series of questions by various internal experts at the museum and my respective leaders here at the museum. So I'm more than a little nervous, but also very excited to finally get to move on and become a tenured faculty at the university, which is just, hey, it feels like it has all happened very, very fast. I realized yesterday that I joined Tumblr as a bachelor student, and as of Friday, I will be, imminently, I will be an associate professor. And it feels like those are two very different human beings who have kind of, been using that very silly platform over the last, over a decade now. So yes, it's, very exciting and nerve-wracking. And it's very hard to practice a 45-minute presentation because every time you do, it takes 45 minutes, which is a significant portion of the day. Yeah, I've had a couple times to practice it. Last time we practiced it, I nailed it at 43 minutes. So, but you guys know how I talk. And there's a decent chance that when I go to give the real presentation, it could be like plus or minus 15 minutes, I think is easily in there. But I'll try not to muck it up and go over, or we'll see. Anyway, that's the most relevant and important thing that's happened on my side. How about you guys? How's things? How about you, Ethan?
I'm in graphic novel hell, so I'm trying to finish this book.
Yeah.
And it's, it's progressing, but it's slow and lonely work.
Yes. Yeah. It's nice to be able to see a little bit of a window of that over on Patreon, where we can get to follow a little bit of the stuff that you're doing, also on Blue Sky. And also, I guess through our various chats, get also,
yes, yeah.
I'm privy to some of the illustrations as they come along, and they look awesome. I mean, so good.
Yes, they do.
It's going to be so nice.
The cover is amazing. I really love the cover.
Thank you.
That you did.
That was a commission piece. That was the one thing. But yes, it's all coming together. So
Super nice.
Yeah.
And how about the newt room? What's new in the newt room?
Well, marbled newts and palmate newts have started laying eggs for the year. So
very good. Yes, we'll actually come back to talking about newts and newts getting freaky a little bit later on in this episode. How about you, Hiral?
I guess I haven't officially. Yeah,
Dr.
I haven't
Hiral?
officially announced it, but yeah, I'm now Dr. Knight.
We have to redo
Congratulations,
the
Dr. Knight.
Yes.
No, that's fine. We can now do it.
Dr. Knight, that's amazing. How does it feel?
Yes.
How does it feel?
A bit strange, and very, very strange to put this chapter behind and not constantly feel like I'm stressing about this one thing. Now I'm stressing about a million other things.
All the other things.
That's a whole other story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's a little bit like Stockholm syndrome.
I don't know. Not quite. I feel like, honestly, I need a holiday. I need a long holiday. That would be great.
After I defended my PhD, but before I was officially awarded a PhD. No, that's not true. After I handed in my PhD, but before I defended, I took a long, I went to Madagascar for 3 weeks, just on holiday, essentially. And that was so necessary. I also got the worst sunburn of my life, which helped to put things into perspective. But I can recommend it. I think it's a great idea also to blow off a little bit of that steam that comes from that anxiety leading up to the whole process. But wonderful. How has maybe it's a bit of a personal question, but like how have your immediate surrounds and your family and so reacted to like you completing? That's a big deal, yeah?
Yeah, everybody's been so supportive. It's so strange to get that support sometimes. Like it's fantastic, but it is when you come out of doing something so big and something so, I guess, important, you have to still take time to process what you just did.
Yeah.
And I think the other people don't. They're like, they see it quicker than I do.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, that's been great.
It's a massive transition.
They don't see all the blood and tears that went into it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, they're always happy to see that success and like congratulate you for your success. That's at least that was my experience. I think I went through the same kind of, especially because for me, I had kind of, the PhD was the end goal because of how I was raised. And we can talk about that another time. But basically, my career aspiration was to have a PhD, and that I had this very bizarre, wait a second, I've somehow missed all of the rest of life after that aspiration. What now? And it took me some time to like process that and be like, okay, all right, have to actually keep going with the postdocs and everything. That was like, that was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah, I think I'm in that transitional stage now. Kind of, okay, well, I set my own projects, or, what am I working towards now? Mm-hmm. How do I change it to suit my life and my lifestyle?
Yeah, when it's been a myopic focus for like, 3-4 years or longer, it's like, okay, now there's another thing once we've done that and it's behind us. Yeah, I'm really hoping that my thing on Friday, this in 2 days, will also feel a little bit like that, but mostly that it's the relief. I mean, I'm counting on this because it is essentially the end of my planned ladder for now. I don't have aspirations to become full professor here, at least not in the immediate future. So I no longer have to worry about temporary contracts or that kind of thing. I'm just like, we'll finally be able to breathe a huge sigh of relief and calm down a little bit. Other than the fact that I've got massive grants going on. Anyway, so, but wonderful. We are so happy for you, Hiral. And also, it changes the intro, which I need to remember.
Next time, we need to talk about Doctor.
Nice. Yes. Doctor. Yes. There's this fantastic scene from some sitcom, I don't remember what it is, but this military unit where they walk into each other and they're like, doctor, as the greeting. It's very funny. Anyway, long term, the very, very off topic. Gabriel, how about you?
I'm a little bit like Ethan. Well, I'm doing a bunch of stuff right now. A lot of it, of course, as usual, I cannot be, I cannot talk about. I'm doing a lot of the packaging art for some new product from Beast of the Mesozoic figures that are coming soon. Like their figure for a Pachycephalosaurus and
that's a fun
Smilodon.
One. And I have a relevant update, which is that I finally finished watching the Prehistoric Planet episodes.
Oh, awesome.
So at some point we can have a whole episode where we talk about feelings about Prehistoric Planet.
Oh, that would be good.
Because they're not all positive.
Oh. I hope the
art
animals
is spectacular.
The animals that I did the concept art for are positive.
Oh yeah, I don't have enough of an opinion to.
It's very difficult. Well, before we will have the conversation that day, but you have to remember that there's a lot of people involved in this.
Oh yeah,
and there's also a lot of suits involved in this sometimes. So
yes. I know. Sorry, I got you off topic here.
Well, can I just circle back to say that the Beasts of the Mesozoic toy line is freaking awesome?
Yes, it's really amazing. That's why I love collaborating with David, because what he's done with that line, I mean, they're so scientifically accurate.
Their very first Kickstarter to make that first dromaeosaur, and my kid took it immediately. So when I got it. So, but they're awesome.
Well, I'm sure that he's enjoying them a lot.
Yeah.
And talking about Kickstarters, I'm involved in another project that is a Kickstarter, which is the Professor Primula's Portfolio of Paleontology. It's a paleontology theme role-play supplement. If you like D&D and if you like all RPG games, this will be a scientifically accurate supplement. And the project got backed in 12 minutes, and right now it's over 100 and what? Let me see. It's over 100. Last time I checked, it was like over $130,000 already reached. So I'm contributing. I'm one of 4 paleo artists that are working in the project, and I'm contributing a lot of pieces for it, including some are licensed pieces, but there are some that are commissioned particularly for this project, and I'm very excited to
Will you
show
get
them.
to do sapient reconstructions? Or you
No, I'm doing all the. Mine are completely like the
just
paleo
vanilla
art related.
Okay.
Yeah, like that, like I'm doing some like scenes from formations and stuff like that, which is really cool. And
that's really cool.
And it includes not only, because I think they did a project before this that was all dinosaurs that I was not involved in that one, but this one is not only dinosaurs. You have Cenozoic animals, you have Permian animals, you have Triassic animals. So I'm doing like stuff like temnospondylus and all kinds of interesting stuff. So it's really cool.
The reason I asked about the sapient species is that I think that people that, well, maybe this is a bit like how I feel about your art, but when I see you post things on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever that are off of the like what people mostly know you for, but are this like you do such awesome speculative, like creative, and it's very, I find it quite gritty, the kind of that style that you bring to those fantasy creatures. And I would love for you to design something like that, because I think it's just so,
A lot of people have asked me about that. And I always say that if I get a project that I think is really good, I would love to do it. I haven't gotten the opportunity to do it in like a project that I think it's really good, but I would love to try my hand at that. I think the thing is that most people know me is for my paleo art and scientific illustration. So I usually get approached on that vein. But what I know is that they have amazing artists in this project, and I'm sure that and all the other sapient creatures that they will have in this project are going to be amazing. And
when does the
and
Kickstarter end?
I think, well, it started last Friday, and it is 30 days, so
Okay.
it still has a long time to go, but it's already like way
Probably
above
by the time
expectations.
this
By
airs.
the time this airs, it will unfortunately probably have concluded. But we'll include a link anyway in the show notes, and you can go and check that out. And
Yeah,
you can
and some of the people
pre-order.
backing it can suggest species that they would like to see represented. So I think it's a very cool project, and it's the first time that I'm involved in something like that. So I'm really interested in trying it and see how it is.
I'd like to see a Diplocalus as a weapon.
Well, I'm doing Diplocolus for the thing, so we'll see what they do with it.
Yeah, or just a character that like uses Diplocalus skulls like as a boomerang, and
That's true. And I'm doing, and the other thing that I want to say that I'm doing is I don't know if they will be out by the time so I'm not gonna say completely what it is, but by the time this airs, I'm gonna be doing some videos for us for the social media platform of look for like a scientific oriented channel. I'm going to be doing something for their
that narrows it down hugely.
Well, no, to a point, but
people like
I'm
that
going to be doing
connections. Yeah. Okay. Be as vague as possible.
Yes, that's as big as I'm going to be. But I'm going to be doing some videos talking about paleo art for their social media channel. So
cool. Well, that actually
I'm working on that right now.
That's a great segue. So what we're going to talk about today mostly is requested topics that we have gotten from various people. We asked on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on Tumblr, etc. Hey, send us your questions, and you can get your name shouted out, or at least your handle shouted out on the show, and we'll bring up those questions. We can talk through them. So we have a list of questions here, and the first question that we can talk about directly related, like leading on from that, is from Sorian CYH on Blue Sky. Asked the question, not exactly related, but do you have any advice for someone considering to pursue art/scientific illustration as a career? What education and skills would be helpful, etc.? I imagine that Ethan, you and Gabriel have
my advice. Don't.
Yeah. I mean, is that because of the?
It's because I'm very tired, Mark.
Yeah.
And I think Gabriel is too.
Yes, it is a lot of work. So be prepared to work your ass off. That's what I'm going to say.
And there may not be a lot of money in it.
No.
In fact, almost certainly there is not a lot of money in it. But
yeah.
if you like doing that stuff, then you should pursue it. Just be prepared to probably take on other work also to pay the bills.
Yeah. Be aware that if your job is what you love, then you're working all the time. It's not just that you get to do your hobby for fun. You also have to do your hobby when you don't want to do your hobby.
Yeah.
And also because the money is not wonderful, you're going to have to be working all the time to pay your bills. So yeah.
No, I don't mean to be glib. I'm being funny, but also I'm not really joking in that it's not an easy. Also, it's not necessarily something that you like aim to get into. At least you kind of, I'm not really a scientific illustrator. I would say I'm like a science adjacent illustrator in that I do a lot of content that is kind of science communicative, but not necessarily science illustration. And that's a weird niche to be in, and I didn't intend or set out to do that. I kind of fell backwards into it.
What is your formal training, Ethan? Like what?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Media Arts and Animation.
Well, that's relevant.
Yeah. But I don't do a lot of animation these days. I ended up going much more
But
Sure,
your
but I
style,
mean-
I always felt it's very animation like.
It lends
Like
itself
your
to
style, and even
animation.
the way
It
that
also helped with speed, because if
Yeah.
you're drawing something, especially in 2D animation, if you're drawing something that you need at least 12 drawings to make a second worth of film, then you get you get less precious about the individual illustration, and you get better at being accurate quickly. So that helped me, I think.
A lot of it is
Yeah.
also that marketing skill, right? I mean, I guess right now there is this, well, far be it for me to like talk about how it works for you guys, but I have the strong impression that right now there is if you're not selling yourself all day, every day, it's so hard to compete in this market. Like,
Yeah.
how do you get out there without being
The answer used to,
entirely
yeah.
on all the time?
Not to dredge all this up, but it used to be that Twitter was the way that I got
May it
most of
rest
my
in
work.
peace. Yes.
Yeah. I got most of my work through that, and most of my career got started through connections that I made on there. And it still is kind of, I still kind of rely on those connections, but I've had to rebuild everything over on Blue Sky and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And Gabriel, you're more of an Instagram guy, but it's the same thing, I think, right? It's basically,
I mean, Twitter was great for me as well, and
Yeah.
even though I'm still on Twitter or X or whatever they call it now, it's so different. Like right now, the engagement is very difficult, and then if you dare to promote anything, then the engagement is very low.
It sucks.
So
yeah.
it's in a way it's been very it's difficult. And in my case, I think that I differ from Ethan in which I am a scientific illustrator, and that's what I wanted to do. But I always say, but I've been interviewed about this several times, and I always say the same thing, which there are two main avenues in scientific illustration. One is medical illustration, and the other one is paleo art. Those are the ones that have the most revenue. Like you can get the most revenue from. I am a big germaphobe. I was never going to go into medical illustration because that was going to freak me out. So I love animals. I've always loved animals. And that for me was a natural progression to go into, paleo art. So for me, it was in a way like Ethan, I fell into it, but it was a natural progression coming from,
And your formal training
wildlife
is
illustration.
also as a scientist, as a researcher, right?
And an illustrator and graphic designer.
Yeah. So what are your creds?
Illustrator and graphic designer.
Okay.
That's what I finished.
Okay.
That's what I finished in school. And I think to go back to what Ethan was saying, it is very difficult, and there is a lot of competition. And to make yourself stand out, you have to be present 24/7 and find ways in which you can put your art in front of as many people's faces as you can. Especially when you're starting. I think once after a while, then you create some sort of a name, you can start. But even though, I mean, I'm always stressed out. Like, am I doing this enough? Should I try this?
Yeah.
It's like a constant. But I think that's not only us. That's art in general. Artists in general. Whether you're a musician, that's the nature of being an artist. You're always competing, and you're always having to struggle and like find new ways.
You're always either worried about having too much work or not any work, and it's somewhere between. And I've said that before, I think, but like that's the truth of it for me is if you don't have anything lined up, which is possible, then you're
Yeah. A lifetime ago, I was considering a career as a professional photographer, and that was exactly the reality. It was like, and in many cases, as a photographer, you're also having to like sell yourself short a little bit in order to cover the interim pieces and do photography that you're not very passionate or good at. And that is kind of like, I distinctly did not have any interest in photographing weddings, but that's where all the money is.
Well, I've wanted to do comics for years,
Yeah.
right? Since I was little, and I started doing those things by doing my own things and putting them on the internet for free. And there's a whole discussion to be had. Lots of people talking about how you don't work for free, you don't work, but if you're working for yourself, working for exposure is okay. If you're putting out work that you're doing and you're using that to build something,
Yeah.
I'd probably put doing web comics and stuff like that. It was probably 5 years of free labor worth out there before I got any actual paid work out of it.
Yeah.
And that's just audience building, essentially.
Yeah, that I mean, audience building is the perfect thing. I think that so much of this is related to you have to be not just tech savvy and social media savvy, but you have to really master how those algorithms work. And you can read about those things. People explain them all the time. They change a lot, but
They change a lot.
You have to be really good at matching that thing that the algorithm essentially is doing at the moment for the platform where most of your revenue is being generated.
Which is why you're probably going to see the thumbnail for this video change.
Yes. Well, but I am not from a world of search engine optimization.
But I must say that you also have to develop a thick skin.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And you also need to know when to take some time to recharge and off, because the nature of being exposed and having to be on social media, especially at times like this, it's very difficult. And I would love to, like, neither Ethan or I have the luxury of say, oh, I'm just going to take a week off social media and I'm not going to do anything. We can't.
Yeah.
So for us, we have to find ways in which we can do our job while trying to stay away from a lot of mess,
Yeah.
Definitely.
It got very bad for me with Twitter at the end of Twitter, and that's why I don't really use Twitter anymore. It wasn't even so much that, because I was still getting some work through it, but like it was so bad, and engagement wise, it just kept getting worse and worse. So it was like diminishing returns on something that was already crap, and
it's harmful to your mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dicks on Twitter, which is a great segue.
To
our next topic. I was scraping the bottom of the barrel, friends.
Perfect.
The next question comes via Gabriel's Instagram. Biscotto al latte asked about the hemipenes in lizards. How are they compared to other reptiles? So this is maybe a bit of a fun topic for us to talk about, slightly more joy-filled or entertaining, at least, than the current state of the social internet. I guess reptile sex 101 is it's complicated within reptiles. It's highly varied within reptiles, and I'm now speaking about reptiles in the correct taxonomic sense that includes birds. But intromission, so mating with a sexual organ that is phallus or phallus-like, has evolved several times within reptiles. SquaMates have had a single origin early, or at the base of the SquaMate tree, to have a pair of hemipenes. And that is distinctly different from rhynchocephalians, at least the Tuatara, the only example where we know anything about it because it's the only surviving example. Tuatara have a essentially flat cloaca, and they achieve intromission in the same way essentially as a chicken does, which is, I guess, gently termed a cloacal kiss. So they do not have any kind of phallus or anything like that. And then, of course, famously ducks have these ridiculous corkscrew-shaped penises. And then also crocodilians have a single intromittent organ, I believe, and turtles and tortoises as well. So I don't know, actually. Perhaps, Gabriel, you can answer this question. Do we know anything about early dinosaur genitalia at all? Nothing?
Nope,
We don't
no,
know.
but because the similarity of birds and crocodilians is probably means that archosaurs had some sort of similar. That's a single penis, like
Right.
What's the
situation.
thinking
That's what I
on?
think.
What's the thinking on pterosaurs? So pterosaurs also being archosaurs.
Pterosaurs are also archosaurs, so they would probably
Yeah.
have the same. But they were flyers, and they
Right.
could have gone the same route that birds did,
And they were
you know,
highly
which
diverse.
is because a lot of birds don't have any penis anymore.
That's what I was curious
So-
about it. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So we don't know.
Yeah.
Because of course soft tissues don't preserve. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
difficult to get preservation of soft tissue.
And it's so interesting because that is so much of the musculature that's involved in controlling that organ is actually anchored in the hip and the tailbones. And so the transition in pterosaurs to the shortening of the tail would probably also have a bearing on the load of that thing. The same is true of the birds, although I don't know if there's like significant differences in musculature between birds with and without a penis. But like,
Well, I think that birds that don't have a penis are better flyers in general.
interesting. But then, okay, better in terms of more maneuverable and controllable, presumably, not in terms
Probably
of
because the
speed.
ones that have yes, exactly.
Because ducks
More
are
than
like
speed.
hella fast.
Yeah, but it's not a peregrine falcon. You know what I mean?
No. But like in terms
So,
of
yeah.
sustained flight, I believe a duck still
Yeah.
has the title.
Do eagles?
Probably, but I meant like maneuverability and
Yeah, sure,
you know, I
sure,
would
sure,
imagine that they are like because it's what is believed. It's a way to make them lighter. They just birds try to find every way in which they can get lighter.
Yeah, really interesting. And then, of course, in terms of their overall structures, hemipenes are completely ridiculous structures. If you're interested in those kinds of things, there's a.
I'm gonna show people a photo of a hemipene of a.
Yes,
maybe
I can
there
show
is-
people a real one. Let's try not to get this video taken down from YouTube.
Oh, we're gonna. I was gonna say we're gonna get demonetized, but we don't get.
Content
We're not
review.
monetized to begin with.
Yeah,
At all,
well,
yeah.
exactly. We are totally unmonetized, which means I can show off the exciting things I have in this jar here. If I can find a pair of
All
tweezers.
right. Well, then I know what the episode title is now. Mark shows us his hemipenes.
Yes, well, all right. So I've got here, I couldn't find any tweezers, so I just had to reach.
That is the reason that
directly.
we're all like this.
Yeah. All right, we'll get the thumbnail now, shall we? I'll just show you this, and then you guys can do the gasp. Ready?
The
Here we
Mr.
go.
Beast. Yeah.
Yay! Right, so this is a chameleon. I believe this is Temple's.
Jacksons,
or
right?
no, this is Werner's chameleon. So Trioceros vaneri, it's got these beautiful 3 spines in the front. Those of you who are listening on audio are kind of missing out on the whole experience. You can come and watch us on YouTube, and you get a little bit of the viewing pleasure. But don't worry, it'll be over before you know it. In any case, this is a beautiful male Trioceros vaneri from Tanzania. It's got these lovely 3 spines, very similar to Jackson's chameleon. And back at the back, someone has very nicely and carefully prepared the hemipenes. Now, hemipenes in general, very relevant and interesting to know. They do not contain a tube. It is not a tube like that of mammals that you will likely be familiar with, but rather it is an open cup-shaped structure. So the sperm runs along a groove called the sulcus spermaticus and runs from the base up and to the open face, where it is then passed to the female organs. Chameleons are very interesting in this regard because they have a great variety of hemipenial structures. And I've actually got a many times rejected manuscript that features prominently in my PhD about the evolution of chameleon hemipenes, because they have a remarkable degree of ornamentation on them. So why would you ornament something that you can't really see? Well, it turns out that when they're on the inside of the female during intromission, they're probably doing all kinds of weird stuff. So chameleon hemipenes, like the ones that I just showed, which unfortunately you can't actually see them nicely in the video, but maybe I can show a picture here. Chameleon hemipenes have a variety of different structures. In fact, some of the structures my colleagues and I have gotten to name ourselves because no one had characterized them before. But very frequently we have these structures called rotulae. Rotulae are a disc essentially with a series of little lobes at the end that look a little bit like spikes. And we think that those are stimulating some part of the internal wall. They move, they are pulsating as the organ is filled with and then emptied of and filled with blood. So we know that this happens because there are videos on YouTube of people who watch their chameleons try to mate where the male missed. And then you can see these structures moving. I'll try to include a link in the show notes. It's quite a fascinating process. So we don't really understand a lot about that. We especially do not understand what the lock and key kind of looks like when it comes to the mating process, because no one has yet gotten ethical permission to drop a mating pair of chameleons into liquid nitrogen, which I would dearly like to do, but it's not an easy thing to justify. But getting that thing caught in the act is would be fascinating because we extremely don't know how this works.
You're like, I'm sorry, guys, it's for science.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so they also are covered in this honeycomb-like structure at the base. It's called calyces. And we're not really exactly sure what those are, but it's probably for retaining structural stability, I would imagine. You have to remember that the hemipenis in its retracted form sits inside a bag at the base of the tail and is completely inverted. So it is what we call everted in order to bring it out. And so it's basically the same. You're turning a sock inside out, right? So that is a very dramatic process when a lot of the inside of that sock, as it were, is covered in all kinds of different structures. And there's all kinds of ways that you can kind of adapt that to make it very functional. What's really interesting is that a lot of these structures are covered in horns and spikes and all kinds of weird things. So my colleagues and I from the Calumma nasutum species complex, we characterize these little paired needle-like structures that only come out when the hemipenis is completely extruded. And they are really long and they come out the sides. But they're like telescopic. So they're the last thing that comes out once the hemipenis is totally extruded. And we have not the faintest idea what they're for. But we were able to visualize them using DICE CT, this CT staining technique where we stained tissue with iodine and then scanned them. And they're really a fascinating thing. We do not know what that's for. The other group of reptiles where hemipenal diversity is greatest is snakes. And in fact, Cope, who people might know from the Bone Wars and other famous things that he was involved in, Edward Drinker Cope, who is a very problematic character, extremely problematic character. He was, however, also one of the very first people to say, hey, if you start paying attention to the hemipenes, you can reconstruct with a much greater fidelity than just looking at the skull, the evolutionary relationships and especially taxonomic relationships of snakes. And his ideas about snakes were dead on the money based on that. Well, not exactly on the money, but the idea was correct. Hemipenes contain a huge amount of taxonomically relevant information and is very, very useful. Why that is probably requires an entire lecture, if not a podcast, to basically explain how sexual selection works and why it's such a useful place for us to find characters. But mainly, I think the thing to know is that when the structure is not on the outside of the body, it doesn't have to have much of a role in terms of survival, and can really have a much greater role in terms of just the sexual selection that it's involved in. So it's really
some species that can look very, very similar outside can have very, very different hemipenal structures. So
yes. And that's
it has amazing diagnostic value. The shape of it.
It does. Although
I
it depends
had-
a little bit on the taxon, because in some cases
Yeah.
they're really basically identical between sister species.
I had a crested gecko one time that loved to lick itself
Mm-hmm.
and would evert its hemipenes, and it got stuck in the out position. And
Yeah, that happens in chameleons too sometimes.
basically the vet was like, just put some cortisone on it, and it went back in.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But apparently I've known other people where it's gotten stuck out and like fell off.
Yeah, that does
And
happen.
they'll-
What? Really?
And
Yeah.
they'll just kind of go on with the other one. They're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, I got a backup.
Yeah, so I mean, the obvious question that rises now, we've got two of them, but they go on either side. Like, is there handedness? We have this question a lot. And the answer is maybe. There seems to be some evidence that there is handedness involved.
Do female SquaMates have two vaginas?
Not two vaginas, but they have hemiclitories.
Okay.
So there is an equivalent structure that is very poorly understood. There was a very well popularized recent paper that described it in greater detail than ever before. It had been very briefly treated in the late 1800s, but essentially had been neglected until then. It's not nearly as easy to study because you can't just avert it.
Yeah.
But we are learning a lot more about it now when we start to pay attention, which is,
Yeah. I mean, thanks to everting, that's been in the reptile hobby. That's how you sex snakes.
Yeah.
I mean,
very frequent.
you pop them and they pop open.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So anyway, that's the hemipenes in lizards. They compare to other reptiles in kind of a weird way, in that it's like SquaMate thing is that there are two of them, and they are fascinating, and a lot of people have given them a lot of attention. Not nearly enough people have been giving the hemiclitories attention, and hopefully that will also be changing in the near future. I know that there are some groups who are working on that. There are great new methods for preparing those organs as well that people need to get a little bit better at actually applying. So, yes.
Kudos to us for making it all the way through that with a minimum of
giggling. I think we've been keeping it well.
I think we did it pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
Well done, us. We're great at this. Yeah. Anyway, right. So we can move on to the next question here. Eyes on the Dirt on Instagram has asked us to talk about cold versus warm-bloodedness, which is a hopefully relatively quick answer. In essence, it's an oversimplification. The public perception of what cold-blooded and warm-blooded are anyway a little bit iffy. But yeah, things that are so.
It's better to use the words endothermic and ectothermic.
Yes. And then there is all kinds of other terminology that has been come up with. So poikilothermic, things that change temperature with their environment. Homeothermic, retaining temperature. So all kinds of other terms that come into there. There's a big axis. But in essence, cold-bloodedness is an oversimplification. However, there are some relevant pieces there. So what do we mean when we talk about cold-bloodedness? I suppose what we really mean is that we're talking about the ability of the animal to generate its own heat.
Yep.
And there, in terms of, we can talk about reptiles and amphibians for this, I think, because within modern reptiles, it's a very slim list of species that are considered facultatively endothermic. So that excluding birds, right? So birds are this remarkable innovation within the modern reptiles. But the other reptiles that can generate their own heat is a short list, right? So I think the leatherback turtles, when they reach a certain size, are widely considered to be endothermic. Gigantothermy is also a thing and would have been very relevant in the earlier branches of the dinosaurian tree. So gigantothermy is essentially you get so big that you wind up making your own heat, whether you like it or not. And I would also point out that the way that birds have achieved endothermy and the way that mammals have achieved endothermy is also quite different. It's probably different at the chemical level, although I don't think that it's very well understood. But essentially, I like to think about it like this. Body heat is produced by the inefficiency of the mitochondrial and other organelles acting within cells. When the cells lose heat in addition to the normal process, or as a consequence of the normal processes that they're undergoing, that heat is basically keeping the body warm. The metabolism that we see in the so-called ectotherms, so in all modern amphibians, as well as most modern reptiles, is basically very efficient because they, like the chemical processes are not losing very much heat when they are happening. However, when they become inefficient and you generate that heat through that metabolism within the cell, you can co-opt that to generate your own heat. Yeah? So that's essentially what's happened in birds and mammals independently. And that, because it's happened independently, is the reason that they're chemically quite different processes, or at least I think that they would be. Right. So the other great example is snakes, right? There are several snakes that are facultatively endothermic, that can generate heat either in order to help them with digestion, or in order to help them to incubate their clutches. I believe there's like giant pythons that do this with muscle twitching.
They twitch. Yeah.
In order to generate heat. Yeah. So in general, I guess that's the basic breakdown. Is that yes, your terminology is oversimplified.
Salvator teat lizards, the black and white tegus, are facultatively endothermic during reproduction.
Oh, interesting. Okay. How does that work? Do you know how that works?
I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I know that they are during that period of time, they become facultatively endothermic. They also live farther south than other teats. So
right. Cool.
Which is why they can. They say that that's one of the reasons why they can invade places like Georgia and stuff, like where they're now getting more, common. So they bypassed Florida and went to Georgia. They introduced populations because they can survive easier during winter due to that.
Crazy. Yeah, that ability to like turn on and off the your temperature gauge is, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't really talked about how ectothermy works at all, which is, of course, just environmental heat sources. And
I must say that that there are many theories or hypotheses about this on dinosaurs, or like early dinosaurs, but there was basically probably quite a lot of different strategies happening within dinosaurs themselves, within early dinosaurs themselves. So that probably is a very complicated thing that has evolved at many different times in many different ways.
Yeah, for sure. And when you think about it a little bit more broadly, it also goes a little bit crazy because there are other cases where, bumblebees fall in a very weird position on this spectrum because they essentially also generate a lot of their own heat. And they are therefore also are technically endotherms. But I think that poikilothermy, homeothermy axis is also very largely neglected, but is a really important axis here. So poikilotherms are they are thermoconformers. They will change with their environment, and they don't necessarily try to maintain a single stolid temperature. And then homeotherms are organisms that are at least trying to retain a stable temperature. So you can be an endothermic homeotherm, or you can be an ectothermic homeotherm, and the other combination with poikilotherms as well. And most reptiles and most SquaMates and most amphibians are poikilothermic ectotherms. They undergo substantial changes in body temperature over the day and use energy from the sun or other environmental heat sources in order to achieve functional temperatures, and they will basically heat up. That's why you see them sunning, and then will lose that heat slowly over the course of their activity until they need to heat up again. So
everybody who has ever lost like a bearded dragon outside or an iguana,
yes,
it's always the same story. Oh, I put him outside for a minute and it was fine and he was sunny, and then he got overcharged.
Exactly. Yep.
And literally every time, and it's like that is how they work. Yeah.
Yes. It's a dramatic difference between those cold animals and the warm ones. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I think at this point we're going to take a brief break, and we will come back to answer a couple more questions just after the break. And we're back. So our next question comes to us via Blue Sky. loquaciousky.bluesky.social. Our question is, you've talked on an earlier episode about the fancy tail moves some geckos will do as courtship displays, and of course we all know about frog calls. Are there other fun courtship rituals with salamanders or snakes? Great question. Have you guys gotten to witness snake courtship in the wild? Or salamander courtship, for that sake?
No. Oh,
No?
man. I feel like I missed out.
Yeah. I actually have to think about it now. I don't know if I have or not. Gabriel, what have you witnessed?
I observed a pair of Chironius, which is a South American large tree snake, in what I thought at the beginning was a combat, because they're also going to ritualistic combat, but it ended up being mating.
Cool.
Because it's similar in a way that, snakes can only do so much. They can only, intertwine themselves,
Right.
and then, But that's the only time. And I know it's a once in a lifetime experience. It's not easy. It's not easy to find snakes in general. So seeing that situation in particular,
you got to be lucky. For me, it's garter snakes, Thamnophis. I have observed them in the wild doing the mating ball, and it's really
awesome.
cool. Yeah.
I've seen some stuff in captivity, I guess, which is, I suppose different from what you'd see in the wild, because in the wild they do, especially with snakes, they go through a ritual of, especially like with pheromone trailing, where the males then have to find the females, and then in different species display different, behaviors. But as Gabriel said, people often confuse male-male combat with reproductive behavior, with mating, because snakes coil up with each other, and they kind of, get quite excited and move in a way that could almost be quite aggressive, or interpreted as aggressive.
I think it's so interesting how in gecko courtship and other, just actually maybe a bad way to phrase it, in most SquaMates, courtship seems to involve extremely jerky movements of at least one of the sexes at a time. And I kind of wonder what is the achievement that you get from that? Because if you watch it in anoles or in geckos, they're doing this kind of bizarre jerking movement. And I know that I've read descriptions of snake courtship where they also do very strongly these like jagged movements.
maybe
Yeah,
it's
that's
co-
how I
unnatural.
noticed that it was in combat because they got like this
Yeah.
on top of the head.
maybe it's coded, and to them it's coded as not prey.
Yeah. Maybe.
So it's a way to just be like, look, I'm moving, but I'm not. You don't eat me.
Or perhaps it's more. It's less fluid than is typical movement, and therefore is kind of more obvious. It's easier to see.
Yeah.
Anybody who's tried to catch a racer is aware of how very difficult it is to figure out where to put your hand in order to catch the silly thing. And I think that's kind of like, if you're moving continuously, you don't get the same effect visually as jagged.
Or maybe it's something about the way their their neurology is, their brain interprets.
I mean, I was about to say that because reptiles in general, that includes birds, I think they really love those like sharp movements that just stop all of a sudden. If you see birds doing courtship, they do that a lot. If you see lizards, they do that a lot. And like not only with their heads or something, like there are lizards that just move their hands in very particular way during courtship, or frogs do that too. That they do this thing where they move their hands like this or their legs, and they tend to move it.
It could also be tied to breathing, because most of those animals don't breathe the way that mammals do, for example. Totally
but our
different.
Breathing sucks. We have the worst breathing.
Efficiency-wise, yeah. But I mean, it could be related to that even. Like there's all kinds of reasons that could be. Who knows? Or maybe it just is. It's just what they do. Like maybe there's not a particular reason. It's just something that evolved early on and carried through. I don't know.
Yeah, sex is weird.
It is.
That's the answer.
It's extremely.
I was going to say I can speak to the salamander thing, because like a lot of salamanders don't have. I don't think any salamanders have intromittent organs. They have.
No.
There are sirens have apparently.
Caecilians have intermittent organs called a phallidium.
Because of course they do.
Yeah, because they're weird.
Because Sicilians.
Yeah. But like I mentioned, marbled newts at the beginning are laying eggs, and what they do is during the breeding season, the males. This is most triturus newts. The males develop a crest down the back, and then they wave their tails, and they waft pheromones. So the crest actually is like angled over the female, and the tail is wafting in her face. The palmate newts also do the tail thing, but they have a filament on the end of the tail that wiggles even more. So what pretty much all salamanders will do is they'll put down a spermatophore, a sperm packet, and then they will try to entice the female to sit on it. So either, like with axolotls, it's bashing the male will butt heads until she sits on it. It's very sexy.
Like when you're going to the car wash and the guy's telling you to go to the actual.
Yes.
It's very much the air traffic attendant.
Yes.
Yes. It is. I think like the classical thing that people know of newts, at least, is that they do this tail wafting kind of.
But there's a lot like salamandra will chase each other around, and the male will like nudge the female, try to get her into position, and like nuzzle heads together and stuff. There's a lot going on.
And talking about snake again, we forgot to say that boas that have the spurs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They tickle the female with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there's such a huge variety of different things. So I think the answer to your question, Loquacious Sky, is that yes, there are so many fun courtship rituals within all these animals, and many of them are totally uncharacterized. So what I wanted to just say is, like, if you observe it in the wild, there's a good chance that you can make a small publication out of that, and herpetology or similar. Because actually,
video it. It's very important that you video it. If you video it, it's awesome.
Plethodontids. I gotta just say one more. Plethodontids, with the males have.
Yes, true.
Tentacles.
Barbels.
Yeah. They so for chemosensing females, I think, is what it is. Pheromones.
Fun.
Yeah.
A great variety. All things abound, but it's very hard to observe them. If you're fortunate enough, and you can watch salamander courtship in ponds, at least across Europe. You can watch newts doing the tail wafting thing from the shore. If you're fortunate, in the coming months here, as we go into go towards April and May, that's when things start getting hot in the ponds there. All right, and I think we'll take one last question here from Loch Ness Connoisseur. I believe this was on Tumblr. What are some basic ways that we as the public can help frogs? Is there something that they should be aware of? Some action that can be taken? What do you guys think? What's your kind of like go-to? What do you tell people if they're like, how do I save the frogs? Because people know, I think by now it's in public conscious.
Give them all to me.
Frogs are in
trouble. I will take care of them.
Other than giving them to Ethan, what do you guys do?
Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay. All right.
I think the first one is probably having local ponds, and especially in your homes, in your gardens. I've got a cool story about one. I moved into a place where there wasn't really a pond around, and then we had a leaking pipe. But this leaking pipe over time created this little pond, and now I've got the most wonderful varieties of frogs calling in the garden. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. Make it and the frogs will come, right?
Yes.
That's also been, I think that's kind of been so recently there was a study on the success of garden ponds in the UK to help to reestablish frog and newt distributions across gardens in the UK. And I know that Darren Naish, Tetsu over on all the platforms, he does Spawn Watch every year where
drink. We mentioned Darren. Drink,
and that's a new rule, but yeah, it makes sense. In any case, he has a garden pond, and he posts sometimes pictures of him making other people's garden ponds, and it's just so incredibly effective, right? I mean, that's
we made so I live in a very suburban manicured lawn area, and a couple years back I put in not even a 35 gallon tiny little pond, little more than a puddle, and we've actually gotten American toads showing up, and it's been awesome. I didn't know if that was going to work, and I also think that part of it is there's a guy in the neighborhood who also let his swimming pool go feral, basically.
Wow.
And so I'm hearing a lot of toad calls from that area also. I think that probably helped, but they're definitely in my yard.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like they go from humidity sink to humidity sink. So in many places they'll just take advantage of that. Even if they're not necessarily breeding in your pond, they have the option to take advantage of it.
They're sitting there around the pond. So they're definitely they're not necessarily breeding in it, and I didn't need them to or want them to necessarily,
exactly.
but it's awesome. I highly recommend, even if it's just like a little patio pond, I recommend doing it. Now in America, you have to have the caveat of because you're going to get comments about mosquitoes and mosquito it is a problem here, and it is something to be aware of. But I also have been known to leave buckets out in my yard because it's free salamander food. So,
and also if the mosquitoes are there to lay those eggs close to your house, they're already finding reservoirs of water near enough to you to come and bite you. So
yes.
Okay, in places where mosquitoes carry a lot of disease, you maybe don't want to have.
Well, it can, and
I think it's different doing that in New York than different than doing that in Florida, for example.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. But I'll tell you, literally every time it comes up, someone comments about that. So
Yeah.
I'm just heading that off right now. It's
Yeah,
like,
well,
yes.
also you can put in appropriate insects, or you can source them from local ponds and bring
Yep.
them over to kind of seed your little environment.
Last year, I did another little patio pond, and I did Florida flagfish in it,
Mhm.
and which are an awesome little fish. They are cold weather tolerant, and they will eat up all your mosquito larvae if you're worried about
so
that.
if as long as the volume's large enough, I guess you can deal with it that way. Yeah. The other big one for me is like if you're talking about the amphibians in your local environment, if you can somehow incentivize people, if you're living in a temperate climate where it snows part of the year, if you can incentivize people to use gravel instead of salt, that makes an enormous difference in terms of pollution, because pollutants, especially salts, into local waterways is extremely bad for amphibians. We know this. It damages their development. It can destroy their eggs. It hurts the adults. It's just not a nice thing. So it is, in general, you want to kind of reduce the amount of salt runoff, and salting the roads is just a heinous thing that we do on a regular basis. I acknowledge that in some places it's very difficult to do anything else, and gravel is maybe not the nicest thing to be scraping up under the bottom of your car. But if you can avoid salting your path, and especially salting near bodies of water, that makes a huge difference. If you recall, when you win a battle and you want the people not to be able to grow crops there again, you salt the earth. That's what we do every year on those roads. And there's a reason that maybe that's not the best way for us to be practicing this. So I had the benefit of growing up in Switzerland, where a lot of the time they will actually gravel the roads instead of salting them. Very difficult to cycle on.
Yeah, it's hard. Upstate New York, everything is salted. We're known as the Salt City where I live. Yeah. Well, that's also because there was a salt lake near us. But
Sure.
But anyway, it's difficult when you get like 4 feet of snow in a night to do anything else. But you're right. We don't. We try not to do that if possible. And I was also going to add, my last piece of advice is, don't take random animals that you find outside and bring them in your house.
That's good general advice.
They're fine out there. It's okay.
Yeah.
Don't touch them. And if you are going to be walking, try not to. This is for people that live in neotropical places. If you're gonna, which is where the fungus infection is problematic, if you're going to go somewhere natural, please make sure that your boots or shoes are clean. Try to clean them with bleach before you go somewhere, and after you come from somewhere, also cleaning with bleach, because we know that the fungus get transmitted that way to many different areas.
Right.
So that
Please
is
tell
extremely
your
important.
Friends. Please tell your birder friends.
Just consider any biosecurity at all, and you're a few steps ahead of where we are now. You know,
the worst thing you can do is take clumps of dirt with you, because those often are very good reservoir for zoospores of chytrid, which can be a very serious problem if you're traveling internationally, especially major international trips between, for instance, South America and Africa. Please clean your equipment very thoroughly. Bleach is a very effective thing, but only if there are no clumps of dirt, because it has to actually get on the surfaces. That you don't get treated if it's inside a clump of dirt. So clean your boots, which you should do anyway. Better for the boots. There are other chemicals that are less damaging to leather, for instance, than bleach is, so you can use those as well. But I think you should be conscious of the fact that we have these major outbreaks, especially if you're going between Belgium or North Germany and the United States or South America. Please clean your boots, because so far we haven't had an outbreak of salamander vorans, the B-sal, the salamander version of chytrid, in North America or South America, where plethodontid salamanders are having their peak of diversity. But if it gets over, or when it gets over, it will be an ecological disaster, because those are really hot spots. And it is what it has done to fire salamanders is absolutely gobsmackingly awful.
Maybe don't even clean the boots. Just buy a new pair when you buy a new one when you get here. It's fine. Just leave the old pair
but
in Europe.
in honesty, like if you just put a thing with bleach and you walk on it, it will solve a lot of the issues. I mean, like if you just clean your thing and then walk on the thing with bleach, that would solve a lot of the issue.
Absolutely.
I mean, at least you're doing something. It's not like there are less chances that you will carry Kitrit or Bisal or
yeah. And I think those are the main things, So to recap, make space for turtles, but also make space for frogs.
No, we don't like turtles.
Make space in your heart for the turtles. Make space in your life for the frogs. Don't clean your stuff when you're traveling, or buy new stuff when you're traveling, and avoid pollutants in the environment as much as possible. I think those are the kind of main takeaways here. So I mean, it's very doom and gloom when we talk about how amphibians are doing, and that is actually I think well earned, unfortunately, because the situation is less than ideal. But it's great that people are asking about how they can do the best and that they can do. You can get involved in your local herpetology societies or whatever. Often they will have people who go out and check the roads and move animals if they're going through coming out of hibernation and crossing the roads. I know that that's the case in most European countries, for instance. So
it's true here too. Like we do it every year.
Yeah. So hopefully you can get involved in that way. And then, of course, also spreading the word about the SquaMates podcast is a really effective way. Ask your friends if they're talking about the SquaMates podcast, and also tell your birder friends, not necessarily to listen to the podcast. I mean, they are still reptiles, so technically they should.
Exactly.
But they really need to be very conscious of the fact that they are potentially moving pathogens around the world, which
you don't need to. I mean, look, birders, you got one thing right.
Birders have, I mean, birders are getting shouted out here because they are often very mobile in order to pursue their hobby.
Well, no, I was going to say looking and not touching. That's not bad.
That's
That's true. You don't have to touch everything.
That's true. Yeah, getting better at listening. That's an important thing.
We're not all Steve Irwin. We don't have to pick up every animal.
No, true.
That we see.
True, it's true. And that's, I think, where we're going to leave it, friends. So, Hiral, where can one find you on the internet?
Okay, I am at Hiral's Hive on Instagram and at Hiral Knight everywhere else.
Wonderful. Ethan Kosak, where can one find you on the internet?
You can just go to my website. It's ethankosak.com.
That will work. Kosak is not spelled the way it sounds, though. So good luck. You'll find us in the show notes, SquaMatesPod.com.
It's over there.
Yeah, exactly. You can also see it on the doobly-doo in YouTube. Gabriel, on your end?
I'm at Serpent Illus on all social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on X, Twitter, whatever. And you can also visit my website, gabriellugato.com. And yes, there.
Wonderful. You can find me at Mark Scherz, MarkScherz, all over the internet, especially over on Tumblr, where things are often very silly, on Blue Sky, where things are often very serious, on my website, and all of those things. You can also follow the show. You can follow the show at SquaMatesPod on all of the platforms that you so please. We have abandoned Twitter, so don't bother. Come find us on Blue Sky, where the skies are blue and the butterfly is blue. You can also send us questions, squamatespod@gmail.com. You can look out for our notices over on our various respective personal and also podcast social media channels for when we ask for questions for upcoming episodes. This episode, we got lots of lovely questions, and unfortunately, we haven't been able to address them all, but thank you for sending them in. Anyway, we'll try to address some of them in future episodes, and it's good to have a backlog because that's what keeps a show like this entertaining. Please also give us feedback.
And we live under that. We live under that log. That's where we live.
That's very true. We love to hear from you about everything about the show, whether you like it, what you'd like to hear us change. If there are things that you really don't like, please tell us, but don't do that necessarily in an Apple Podcast review, which you should, however, leave for the show because we appreciate it, and that's how people find out about the show. I think word of mouth is like the best way to hear about podcasts. So tell your friends that there's this thing that you have a guilty pleasure listening to while you do other casts, media casts. We know what that's like here also for you. Good. So, just to say, if you
Like and subscribe.
want to,
Yeah.
you can.
You're in
also-
YouTube, like and subscribe. Yeah.
You can, you can leave us comments on YouTube. We will also include those in future.
We had a lot of liking on that log.
Yeah,
So
like
it's-
and
it's-
subscribe.
it's like and subscribe.
Right, we'll leave it there, shall we? And finally, as we like to say in the show, Hakuna
Hakuna Matata.